I'm Melanie Swayze, a global real estate advisor with Gibson Sotheby's based in Metro Boston. I closely advise homebuyers and sellers of all stages of life, guiding them to intelligent, winning decisions.
I'm Derek Lumpkins, a real estate investor with a background in community organizing. I also enhance equity and inclusion initiatives at companies and organizations, and I guide leaders through executive coaching.
When we get together, we dive into the intersections of culture, class, mindset, and Black freedom.
Welcome to the Black Landing Forum,
a podcast about Black wealth, power, and land.
Hey, Miss Melanie.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It's still relatively new. By the time this gets out, it'll be like, February? Maybe just post Valentine's Day or something. So hopefully there's a little bit more love in the world than what we're experiencing now.
Yes, let's send it.
We're about halfway through January, and it already feels like a full year has gone by.
Tell it.
I don't know if I want to tell it. I don't know if I want to tell it because it's been a lot already. And I got to say, I'm not sure I'm ready for today's conversation. Because we're bringing back our guest, Joris Lechene, who was here with us in 2025. And one of the things he said back in that episode, the first episode with him, was that empire with a capital E exists globally. And there is no outside. There is nowhere to go to be outside of empire.
At this stage in history.
Correct.
Yeah.
And after he said that, and after I started thinking about it, I was like, oh, damn, he's right. It's everywhere. Not only can you not get out, but it comes for you. As we've seen in countries, or in the way our country is operating. Let's just stick with our country, with the United States, and the way the United States is operating everywhere, really. I mean, just within the past month. I don't even want to enumerate all the different things that have gone on. Because
that's true.
People can go back, look at the news. It's, and I don't want to dignify it. Maybe that's not quite the right way to express it, but I just don't want to bring that too much into this conversation because we have so much.
We don't want to rehearse.
Right.
Yeah. However, I do think it's worth mentioning, given who we are, given the conversation that we have ongoing, that one of the violations, intrusions right now very much relates to the Caribbean, South America, Latin America more broadly. And that is troubling and sudden and stunning. And so I think for us, like with me and my background, Caribbean background, and Joris, our guest today, also of Caribbean background, it's just another layer of reckoning. Yeah. So I just wanted to at least acknowledge that.
Yeah. And one of the things I was thinking about prior to starting this recording is the role of diaspora. Because we talk about it, we reference it. I mean, you mentioned your connection to Joris to the Caribbean, and then our connection with Joris just in terms of just being Black and also being of the Americas. So, I mean, there's just the aspect of diaspora. I mean, we're leveraging our connection to diaspora through this podcast generally. And so what's the role of diaspora? I mean, I don't have any real thoughts on that. It just kind of came to me earlier today, but I kind of wonder, there has to be more to it than just survival, more to it than just sort of like, okay, this is my experience in the United States. This is someone else's experience in the UK, someone else's experience in Jamaica or Venezuela or Nigeria. There's got to be more to it than that. Or there has to be a way to build something useful so that it operates in a way that benefits us and then potentially benefits the world in a better way as well.
Thank you. I like that.
So just a quick thought.
Yeah.
So, okay. I think I've worked myself up to be ready now.
You're ready. Good. You're primed.
I think so.
Yeah. Let's see where we can get in our exploration with Joris. Let's welcome him on.
Okay.
Joris Lechene, please join us.
Hello. Good.
From the UK.
In the UK at the moment. Yes. Night
Welcome
is setting. Thank you. Yes, I'm very honored and happy to be here for the second time. No, it's nice to be back. We have more to talk about.
Oh, goodness.
And the honor is definitely ours because you definitely bring perspectives and insights that we are not necessarily thinking about, in part because of where we are in the world,
Yeah.
from the States and also just our experiences versus, some of the experiences that you have and have had as well. So as you've heard, you didn't quite bum me out, but I was just kind of like, dang, empire is everywhere and we can't escape. And as we see, it comes for you. But with this idea of diaspora, because
Yes.
we exist globally as well, is there a way to leverage that?
Well, so there is some hope. There is hope because when we talk about empire, we're talking about coloniality, which is, I believe, we talked about that last time.
Yes.
The thing with coloniality is that it seeks to destroy indigeneity. And what is indigeneity? It's a way of being, of knowing, of seeing the world and seeing yourself that is more focused on your connection than on your power and the position. So it's the opposite of power worshipping. And coloniality has for about 500 years tried to destroy indigeneity, but there are still indigenous people and there is still indigeneity in all of us. So yes, we all live under a monoculture, a mono empire. However, there have been people who have survived and who have been dealing with this for centuries. And I wouldn't say they are thriving, but there are ways, there are solutions, there are bubbles of hope everywhere in the world, including in our own societies. And this is really what I like to focus on, and also part of what I'm talking about in an upcoming book that I'm in the process of writing. But it's really, okay, things are really bad right now, and they're probably going to get worse until they get better. So I'm not here wishing, I'm trying to not be accelerationist because I don't know how low things could go and how bad things could go. So it's not like, oh, let's just see. However, there will come a time where this is over. This phase of society that we're in, and that is pretty shitty, it will not last. It cannot last, right? Fascism always ends up eating itself. Worshipping of power, there's always going to be a moment where it implodes. So it will not last. And I'm calling for waiting for the moment where there's a collective reckoning where we finally can get together and ask ourselves, what now? What new society do we build from the ashes of the previous one that is currently, falling around us? And I believe that the seeds of the future, the society of the future, are already here. We just need to learn to train our eyes to see it. We need to learn to identify them, and we need to water them like a plant, to make sure that once we've spotted them, they've always been here and they will be here forever, because coloniality wants you to believe that indigenous people are completely, like, indigenous knowledge, indigenous being and ways of being have been destroyed. And yes, they have been damaged, but despite all adversity, despite the hostility, despite genocides, despite epistemicides, we still see that people exist, people and their culture exist. So it really shows that there are certain things that empire cannot destroy. And once empire falls and is done falling, those are the seeds that will grow. So the way my coping mechanism and the way that I suggest that people cope is to turn our attention away from empire, not in the sense of escapism, but in the sense of being aware that it part of the power that it has over us is by constantly being present, consuming us and making us consume. So part of the revolution is already to disconnect from this thing that is taking energy from us, and intentionally draw our attention and direct our attention to what I call little pieces of indigeneity. And I believe that in communities of marginalized communities, especially in our cities in the West, in the US, also in Europe, in the Western world, we have examples of people who have had to survive and to thrive despite marginalization, stigmatization, the shame of living where they live. If you look at every country, those places that are marginalized and stigmatized, they're also the biggest producers of culture. This is where things happen. This is where things change. We have neighborhoods. Let's call them neighborhoods. It's not necessarily neighborhoods if we look at, like, countryside places. But what I'm interested in is more the urban environment. And there are neighborhoods who are always, they're the ones in every country. It's in those neighborhoods, it's in the projects, it's in the marginalized communities, the places that are supposed to be dangerous, that people associate with crime and with violence. They're also the places where the culture happens. They are the generators of solutions for the society of tomorrow. And I think that empire knows that. And this is why throughout history, there's been a concerted effort to further demonize communities that are already underprivileged and already underinvested in, to demonize them, because people in power know that the solution to dealing with their power, they exist, they're being created in those places. So that's why it's so important to demonize them. And if you follow me on social media, or if you're aware of the content that I make regularly, I always speak from the perspective of one of those underloved areas or places that have bad reputation. And there will always be people who are invested in continuing the rhetoric of, oh, what about crime? What about violence? I don't want to live with those people. They are dangerous, etc. And it's like, first of all, it's somebody's home that you're talking about. So even if their neighborhood may have problems, this is still their home. It means something to them, and there's no reason to disrespect it. And the excuse of, oh, it's an underprivileged area. Okay, so why are you making the community that has to deal with that lack of investment, lack of infrastructure, lack of services? They have the double, they also have to deal with the stigmatization and the demonization, even though it's not their fault. So there is a concerted effort to maintain those communities stigmatized and demonized and feared, because they're the ones with the ideas, they're the ones with the solutions, and empire does not want you to know that.
Oh, it was exquisite.
Preach.
Derek cares a lot about bringing culture to the forefront in our conversations. And to me, culture is like broad in a way that I can't pinpoint and say, culture is so critical to that, right? Like, yes, and I'm more likely to talk about material conditions and markets, right? Even though I do believe culture is important. I'm aware of that, as I'm about to say, that I think when we say solutions come out of these communities, I don't want us to just be speaking of the art that comes out of the communities, for example. But I think a key part of, as you describe it, Joris, indigeneity that sustains and is retained a lot in communities that have been in any way marginalized and therefore ghettoized, is connectivity. It's about connection, as opposed to this kind of independent, removed, supposed self-reliance that is the American way, right? We're all supposed to figure out how to chart a path and ascend against whatever billowing tides come our way. But in communities that have been cordoned off, people have to rely on each other. And I think about that not just in urban settings, like in the projects or whatever you want to call it, the hood more broadly, but also I think about like migrant workers, like that, the indigeneity that you're referring to me, part of the spark, part of the seed, part of the connectivity and the light is the fact that people rely on, relate to each other, and cultivate creative ways of doing that, and cultivate language. And there's where the culture is of speaking to each other that can be protective language that may not be understood from the outside, for example. So those kinds of modes, to me, that's like, yeah, it's just an affirmation of what you're saying. Is like, there are ways that people have understood how not just to survive, but to replicate, to reproduce themselves over generations under duress.
Exactly.
Economic and social duress.
And it's very interesting that, you're sort of challenging the definition of culture or the borders of culture.
Okay.
And I agree with you in that sense that it's a very Western colonizer concept of separating the ontological, the way of being, and the epistemic, the way what you know. And so everything that when we talk about culture, we usually associate it with the knowledge, the language, the literature, all of that, which is more on the epistemic side. When you're talking about material conditions, the way that people live, that's more on the ontologic side. But actually, this separation makes no sense, especially in the context of finding solutions for the society of tomorrow. It's precisely accepting that the way we are is also that's our culture. The way we think is shaped by our conditions, is shaped, and our culture. This is how culture is formed. And you talked about language. When we look at AAVE in the United States, this is a language that is emerging from the hardship and from the marginalization. The process of marginalization is also a process of identity creation, culture creation, epistemic creation. And this is what empire and what the power is so afraid of. So yes, when we talk about...
What is AAVE? What is AA?
Oh, African American. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I've actually never heard it called that. Okay.
I want to throw out something, and this is something that I just saw in The Guardian. I don't know how you feel about The Guardian, Joris, but something I saw in The Guardian. Yeah, I had a feeling that would be. He just rubbed his shoulders. I had a feeling.
Let me just interject and say, however, as someone who's in the States, I'm grateful for The Guardian. So it's all relative.
Yeah. So I'm just going to throw this out there because I read it. I guess it was an op-ed, an opinion piece that showed up just before we started recording. And so they were talking about how the United States wants to acquire Greenland and the EU needs to do more.
The United States.
This person was writing. Yes, we know who I'm talking about when I say the United States. And so the EU can do more. And so this person was suggesting that the EU invite Greenland to become a part of the EU as a country. So Denmark would sort of let it go free, and Greenland would come in, and it would have all the rights and responsibilities of it, of all the other countries, including recognition of its language, recognition of all the other things. And so I was like, that's such an interesting idea. But given the context of this conversation, I was wondering, would their inclusion bring this new visibility of indigeneity into the EU? Or would being part of the EU just make it sort of like more of a capture of empire?
Or are they already captured and this gives them a chance to self-identify? Sorry, go ahead, Joris.
That's a very interesting question, and obviously you're throwing this at me, so I'm thinking about it, and that's very interesting. But it's very much wishful thinking, because Greenland is already colonized. It's colonized by Denmark, and I was not particularly aware of it because, well, who talks about Denmark unless you have immediate connections to it? But Greenlanders in Denmark are the bottom of society. So they are the ones who are the most marginalized. They are the ones who have to deal with the stigma. And there's those horrible situations that keep happening still now in 2026, where there's this rule in Denmark, this law. I can't go. Obviously, I'm not too educated on this, but basically that says that if the state determines that you are not able to look after your child, to provide for your child, then the state will take your child away. And what happens is that their test is very Eurocentric, and people from Greenland keep failing that test. And so you have mothers who have their baby taken away from them the day that they give birth because they are deemed not capable of raising that child, simply because their culture is different. And I think it's like some arbitrary things, like the making eye contact with the baby. I can't really remember what is the main criteria that is getting Greenlander mothers completely like at risk of having their children taken away, but it's purely cultural. So it's like, if you take away your Western centric lens, you realize, no, they've been people in Greenland, indigenous people in Greenland for hundreds of years. So like, clearly they know how to raise their child in their culture. But it's simply like, if you have the colonizer way of seeing it, and you justify, you have the entire power of the state to take away those children. So there's this quiet, almost, it's part of a genocide that is happening in Denmark, that Denmark is doing to Greenland. So whenever I hear those conversations about the US invading Greenland, it's obviously every bit as ridiculous as it sounds. So that is ridiculous. But at the same time, I feel a bit bitter, because it's like, oh, so you now going to make me defend Denmark and the right of Denmark to continue the horrible colonization of Greenland and the horrible treatment of their civilization, their culture, because of Orange Man. That is like, so like, you're putting me in a ridiculous situation. And now regarding the EU is a council of the colonizers. So I do not see how they would suddenly, well, I don't see how Denmark would relinquish sovereignty over Greenland. And even if Denmark did, the EU wouldn't want that. Also, you have to remember that there are several members of the EU who have like separatist movements who are dealing with that. And it's, so in the UK, we have Scotland. There was a referendum, and there might be another referendum. So there's always this conversation, especially when Brexit happened, about Scotland leaving the UK, but to rejoin the EU. Mm-hmm. So, but there were countries that were completely opposed to that, including Spain, for instance, because Spain, they have the Catalans, and you would know that, Eric, and Catalans who, a big portion of the Catalans want independence from Spain, and they will still want to be part of the EU. So that means that each country that has to deal with separatist movements within their border, they link arms, and they would oppose any bids for a new European country to appear and to still be part of the EU. So in its structure itself, the EU would not want that. And the whole concept of the EU was also built to not allow that anyway. So I love the idea, but it's never going to happen.
I don't even know that I love the idea. I mean, I think I have to sit uncomfortably with the idea, I should say, because
the idea of Greenland becoming part of the EU or something else.
Let's say, yes, by this mode, under these circumstances, right?
Well, technically, Greenland is already part of the EU, just to clarify.
But as an independent sovereign.
Yes, exactly.
But as a sovereign.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then, to my mind, and this could be internalized, marginalized thinking on my part, but I think Greenland partly can be gone after because it is a territory already. It is vulnerable in that way as a territory because it's not a sovereign. And if it were then as a fix, given that sovereign status, without a strategy, without a long-term strategy for it to actually build real independence, it becomes even more of a target. It becomes ghettoized and cut off from resource. And to me, that's also a threat. So I don't, we're talking about you can't get away from empire. I don't see any of these scenarios, however it spins, being good for this part of Denmark, for Greenland.
Yeah, no, there's nothing good can come out of this.
Unless just leave them alone. That's probably the better,
Yes, unless they're, if they could.
And it's rural, in my understanding, right? It's like, it's just a different kind of landscape, life. So, you're talking about, this is a shock. This would be a shock.
I don't think there's even 600,000 people there.
An ecological and cultural shock.
Yeah, I think it's 30,000 people. Let me look that up. Yeah. But
But
yes,
see, it's like that going after the vulnerable. It's just so troubling. And so it's like,
there is
do it.
there is something that I find interesting, and I have to be very careful when I say that, because the topics that I love to talk about is, and I have to repeat that over and over again in my content. Colonization and invasion are not the same thing.
Okay.
So invasion is included in colonization, because when you colonize, you have to invade, but you can invade without colonizing. And when we have conversations around colonization and how evil it was, etc., there's always people saying, oh, but what about the Ottomans? What about this? Every country has invaded another country. Yes, but not every country has colonized another country. What is interesting with this, and that's why I have to be very careful, this, to me, it seems like an example that we haven't had in centuries of a Western country. Well, actually, not in centuries, since Hitler, but that a Western country invades without it being in the context of a colonization. But I have to be super careful, because so invading in the sense that is very brazen about, we just want the territory. We want more space.
It's not resource extraction, straight resource extraction.
Exactly. Colonization, there's the excuse of, there's the belief that, oh, we are a superior people, and those people that we're colonizing, they exist to serve us. Whereas you can invade, and there's not necessarily, you just like, okay, I want that, I can have it, I have the material means to help myself, so I will do it. And this is kind of what Trump is doing. Now, it's very important, we have to add the caveat that doesn't mean that, invading is not as bad as colonizing. They're both terrible. Right? Especially for the people on the receiving end of it.
That's right.
You don't there's no, oh, it's better to be this or that. But it's interesting in the justification of it, because we have completely lost all pretense of, civilization, of the West. We are bringing democracy. We are bringing freedom. Right. Yeah. At least we don't have to debunk that, because he's not even bothering with that. So that's kind of interesting, because also, I think that the US can militarily invade new territories. The US can maintain its global hegemony, and the current government can stay in power until the end of the term. But you cannot do all three at the same time. So I believe that something has to give. If Trump succeeds in invading Greenland, I don't think that his regime would survive, because internally, not only does it not make sense for Greenlanders, but I don't think that the population of the United States is at the moment where they would feel particular pride in invading. Of course, there would be your 30% of MAGA people.
I think that's hopeful on your part.
It's not even 30%. So I would kind of agree with Joris here. I don't think that even the 30% of MAGA is in support, because even they're split over the invasion of Venezuela.
Yeah.
And then you have all the rest of us, from the moderates to the far leftists, who are also just like, no, this is
now we're veering into politics. But I'm like,
when were we not in politics?
No, what I mean is this current electoral political moment, right? To say, what are the repercussions in the next few months, if and what do the voters do? Or what do the people do? I think short of the United States entering into a general strike to be like, we're grinding this economy to a halt, I think it will be business as usual. People can have their feelings, and that will happen, and there'll be consternation, and people will be appalled. But this train that is going full speed is going to keep going. It's going to keep going. We're going to see fallout, not only from Venezuela. I believe Cuba is next. We're going to see some mashups. And I don't think that it's actually going to change. I don't think the people in the United States are prepared to change that. I don't. And it's troubling.
We're not trained to do that. Unlike some of these European countries, or even
honestly, lately I've been calling on that. I'm like, what can we learn from France? What can we
France, Korea, all these countries. I mean, really, but also we're not trained in two things. We're not trained to strike, because we lost that like 50 years ago.
Beaten out of us.
Yeah, it was beaten out of us and swindled out of us as well. So we're not trained to do that. But we're also not trained in how to identify and work against authoritarian government, because
precisely we're babies
very long
when
time.
It comes to that. Yes.
Yeah. And even when we had authoritarian government, let's say up until the civil rights era, let's be kind of broad with how we describe it. It wasn't against the entire population.
That's right.
It was against very specific portions of the population, which generationally still understand it and still react against it. But then the majority were kind of like, oh, that's just happening over there in those marginalized, ghettoized cultural neighborhoods that we were talking about a few minutes ago. So now that it's coming for everybody. So part of what I said to somebody recently was that this administration has broken the rules of whiteness, where you make examples of, you hurt and you kill people who are not white. As long as the white community generally sort of like wrings their hand and says, oh, that's just too bad, but it'll get better, things won't change. Now that they've gone after that woman, was it Renee Good? Renee Good. They've broken the rules. They made an example of her to show that we will come after the rest of you as well, but they broke the rules of whiteness. So I think now a lot more people will be kind of like, okay, we definitely need to react in a different way. So I think the ground has shifted. It's a gradual shift because, again, a lot of people are like, oh, that happened in Minnesota. That happened in Minneapolis. Will it happen here? Will it happen in New York? Will it happen in Maine? Will it happen in Florida? The parts come like, nah, not really, but I think it's going to come. Because now that rule, that line has been crossed, why wouldn't it? So I think the administration can't continue to do all that they're doing internally and do all the exploits externally, because they're going to run out of people, they're going to run out of manpower, and they're going to run out of legal justifications. Because at some point, some of these military folks and the rank and file are going to be like, yeah, this is not right.
Yeah.
We need to be more restrained. That's my hope, at least.
That's hopeful.
And I agree with you. We have to be careful because, if there was the potential for people to rise up, it would have happened a long time ago, and it still hasn't happened. So there is something about our society, this moment, that is different from all of the other times that we look back at revolutionary times. Something, because I believe that if we were to quantify all of the metrics of society, economic inequality, economic injustice, lack of means, etc., I believe that we're probably ticking all the boxes that created the conditions for the French Revolution, for instance.
Thank you so much for saying this. Yes.
And yet it's not happening. So there is something different here. And as I'm saying that, I'm reminded of the words of Palestinian author and activist who lives in the Netherlands, Sobi Khatib. And I was asking him about, that was 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. So it was, well, we still are in the middle of the Gazan genocide. But it was at the time I was asking him, why is the rest of Palestine, why is the West Bank not rising, seeing what is happening to Gaza? How do they still continue? I mean, of course, I know they're not happy about that, but how do they not grind everything to a halt? And he was saying to me that it is very difficult to go on strike when you have a mortgage to pay. And I think that this is what is also happening everywhere in the world, including the US, including in France, is that we're still clinging on something to survive. And unless you feel like you've lost everything, then your priority will be to feed your family. Your priority will be to pay your rent or to keep your house. So you're much less likely to do what,
or even to keep your job these days, right?
Yeah.
Like even speaking out, for some people that could mean threatening their livelihood.
And those seeds have been planted a long time ago, and it's working. Yeah. This is what is so frustrating. For instance, how in the United States, your healthcare is tied to your employment. This is to make sure that you cannot revolt, you cannot rise up. And those are the things. This is why when I talk about coloniality, the seeds have been planted a long time ago, but the resistance has been ongoing as well for a long time. So we have this, when you talked about marginalized communities, Black people in the United States, they know, they feel the brunt of empire, but it's probably worse now, but not that much worse. It's only white people who are now realizing, oh, wait, this is fascism. This is ugly. But, this is not news to Black communities, and they have developed that. You guys are still here. So, you have the solutions. You have some of the solutions, even though I despair to see how much Blackness has bought into capitalism and this idea of Black capitalism, how that is part of the seeds that were planted by the colonizer to keep us. But anyway, that's another thing.
So can we just take a few minutes, because I know we're getting close to time, just take a few minutes just to talk about diaspora and the ways in which diaspora can play a part. So, I kind of teased that out a little bit ago, saying, because Black communities exist on both sides of the Atlantic. And I guess technically some of the darker skinned folks in the South Pacific. So in Papua New Guinea and the Maoris and Australia, the Aboriginal folks, they sometimes describe themselves as being Black. And so I guess there's sort of a cousinhood, brotherhood there as well. So in terms of that sort of darker skin, Black diasporic presence, is there a way that we can sort of leverage that to sort of provide some of the answers or some new ways of thinking or dreaming
or solidarity?
Or visioning? Yeah, well, beyond solidarity, because we can be solid. We can have solidarity through the internet.
Sure.
But what do we do? How do we leverage it into action?
Yeah.
Well, again, I think that diasporas already have many solutions for the society of tomorrow. If you think of what a diaspora is, it's a group of people who exist outside of their native land. So that means that they have built the resilience and they have found tools to still create a connection more or less successfully. But I think that it's a fundamental human thing to be connected to our environment, to our land, even when we don't have access to actual land for us to farm or whatever, because the huge majority of mankind today lives in urban centers. So most of us don't have access to land and don't own land or don't have a relationship, a physical relationship with land. However, we are still connected to land, and diasporas have had to build a connection to their environments far away from their culture and their geography, but also their culture, their cultural environment. And some of them are thriving. I mean, you know that it's possible to create an identity away from, for instance, Africa for Black people who were deported by the European colonization. So diasporas already have found ways to create connections to the land, to their environment, that doesn't necessitate having always been on your native land. And so they create solutions for the majority of humanity who does not currently have this connection to the land. We've been doing it. We are doing it. So we have solutions. And I think that society wants us to believe that the only solution is through capitalism, is through, participating in the system. But actually, we have existed as diasporas, as marginalized communities. We know what it is to think more collectively. We know what it is to create a relationship with your environment, even if you do not own the land, even if you do not own your house. You still make it a home by paying rent and organizing it. And this is still the place where your culture thrives, where you speak your native language. So when we talk about neighborhoods and diasporas neighborhoods, diasporas tend to live in community, which is something that is very scary for the state in general. But diasporas very often, even if they live in let's say a shitty neighborhood, and it it can be shitty. Of course, it's shitty through no fault of their own. It's because it's like chronically underserved, underinvested, no services, etc. So that creates a loop. But the people who live there, even as bad as the environment, the built environment might be, this is still, to many people, the only place that they know where people speak their mother language. This might be the only place where they feel safe, even if there might be a high crime rate, and it may have a bad reputation. But this is someone's home, again, that we're talking about. And this is a place that people have learned to love. So instead of taking it away from them, which is very often the response of the state, or even people who are like, they want what's best, and they see poor neighborhoods, they see a ghetto, and they're like, let's destroy all of this and let's build anew. But instead of taking it away, taking the one thing that they have away from them, why don't we use them and see the solutions that have emerged in those neighborhoods? The strength that it takes for you to love your neighborhood and to love your home, despite its conditions, despite its lack of service. This is revolutionary. And this is something that most of us have within us and have experienced. So let's learn to, I know it's very tempting to always think, what do we do now? The world is crumbling around us. Society is getting worse and worse. What do I do? I believe that the solutions are already around us. We just need to see them. We need to train our eyes to see those solutions, to identify them, to change the way we see things. Oh, you talking about the ghetto and bad neighborhoods. Change the narrative. If in those conditions people have been living and thriving for decades, what if they have some answers to my problems? What if I went and looked for solutions there instead of deciding that, we have to dismantle this community? So I think that the solutions are around us. And I don't have the solution. I'm not necessarily I don't have the magic secret, but I believe that when we figure out the society of tomorrow, we will look back and think, oh, it was there all along. We just weren't paying attention. So let's start paying attention now.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
I love that idea. No, thank you for putting that out there. And I think that is the call to action for me and for, I think, everybody, just to look out there and be like, okay, what is working here in this community or this neighborhood that, the
go to your marginalized neighborhoods, go to the shitholes of the city that you're in, or talk to people who live there and get their perspective. Learn how they've learned to love the place that they live in. Learn what they find lovable about it, because they do. Learn how they navigate a society that stigmatizes them.
Or where resources are scarce. I mean, who knows what's coming with challenges around electricity and water, right? A lot of communities that have had to go without have a lot of adaptive strategies.
Yeah.
Right? That where they're not necessarily going to freak out. Right? And so that kind of durability, there's something really important to get access to and learn from.
The durability and the creativity.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that you use the term adaptive strategy as well. It's very important. And maybe one last point is that when we have these conversations, there's always someone to chime in and to say that we're romanticizing those neighborhoods, we are romanticizing hardship and struggle, and they're like, well, if I had the choice, I would rather not live there, and so stop pretending that this is a great place to be, etc. And this is not romanticization. We're not idealizing those places, but we're acknowledging that hardship creates conditions for survival that hopefully, once we remove the pressure of the colonizer, of coloniality, then we can thrive. So if we are able to survive under this system, imagine what those survival techniques would do when we no longer have to survive and when we can thrive. So this is Yeah, this is and this we're not
and to have fun along the way. You know, like one of the things you're describing to me about, like when you're describing basically hood neighborhoods, part of what comes to my mind is like music that people can hear out in the street, food that people can smell out in the street, the fact that people come together and eat, like that kind of connectability,
the cookout, the block party.
Yeah, I mean,
this is culture, this is life, this is community, this is life.
That's where you build relationships, allyship, camaraderie. Yeah.
I mean, we have a whole cultural movement from the U.S. 100 years ago. Right now, was the Harlem Renaissance, which to me is one of my favorite literary and musical periods of time from American history. But I mean, I think that is a great model for some of what we're talking about, if not all of what we're talking about right now. So I know, Melanie, you're saying that I like to focus on the cultural aspects of communities, but I mean, I do. But I mean, I think they are sort of the doorways into some of these other deeper levels that are not always obvious.
And what you just mentioned is the instant you said Harlem Renaissance, I'm thinking about not just the artists and activists who are out on the streets, but people in those neighborhoods who were in many ways in crowded conditions, who didn't have enough money to pay rent. And what would they do? Fish fries, right? They would throw a party where you have fish dinner. And that way, I forget what the term was, but that is how people would raise rent for a month.
Rent parties.
Thank you. Was it called a rent party? Yeah. So that's an example of the kind of adaptive, the strategy, the connectivity. And again, I don't want to romanticize it. I don't want to have to throw a party to pay my monthly house payment. But the point is that there are ways to build connections with each other to make it through, to like pierce through whatever this wall of difficulty. So I'm hearing you, Joris, and I'm encouraged to try to think about that. And some of that also means thinking about where we come from. Like think of, for me, where I come from and my immigrant family coming here with nothing and building from nothing, So, and I don't want to say nothing. I mean, my mother was blessed to eventually get papers. That's part of it, to be honest. And these days, if you don't have status, that's a way, 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 way bigger challenge. But even more skillful, right? Communities where there's a mix of families and relationships, neighbors, some who have status and others who don't, and how people learn how to protect each other and get things done. So it's more like bringing us all down to a common ground. Like I keep saying, Derek, in the way that the pandemic brought us all to a common ground of like, all of my protections are kind of ripped away right now. All the things I can take for granted. I have to lean on other people, think with other people to get through this. And I think so that's a skill we need to be able to like really cultivate right now.
Yeah, cultivate, because it's the seeds are already within us. We just need to learn to identify them and water them.
Yeah.
And water them.
Okay, folks. So we still didn't talk about the topic we said we were going to talk about. We still didn't address your book and what your book was going to do. We still didn't do those things.
Actually,
did we? Okay. I felt like we didn't, but okay. If you feel like we did, then we did. I mean, it was a great conversation nonetheless. I enjoyed it as always. So thank you again for coming.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. And for those of you in the audience who are listening and watching, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to leave them on whatever platform you are listening or watching on. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we will see you on the next episode of the Black Landing Forum. Take care.
Take care.